Pakistan relationships worsen as both sides dig in. When the term AFPAC was introduced by the U.S. foreign policy lingo around 2008, presumably by Richard Holbrooke, who later became the first U.S. Special Representative to Afghanistan and Pakistan, many Pakistanis resented the phrase, which they should. I wouldn't want to be coined together with another country. It was originally coined to reflect the belief that the U.S. policy required an unified approach to the military and security issues in the region. Winning a war in Afghanistan required coordinating approach with Pakistan, but in Islamabad, officials felt that the United States was looking at the relationship with Pakistan through the lens of Afghanistan, which is true because the American war in Afghanistan really needs foreign help. Either we're going through their territory, so we're gonna need to cooperate them regardless. 10 years later, the war in Afghanistan continues, and Washington's relationship with Islamabad has worsened. The U.S. has suspended military aid unless the Pakistan does more to crack down on militant groups. Pakistan says Washington is making it a scapegoat for the U.S. failure to secure Afghanistan, which is not true, unfortunately, because Pakistanis like to play this game where they end up supporting this non-state actor like in Kashmir because that's their ultimate goal is to get Kashmir and ultimately Delhi because they would want to conquer the north of India because that's where a lot of the upper echelons of the Pakistani establishment come from. They're immigrants from the Muhajirs, which are immigrants from the northern regions like around the Delhi area. That's where they come from, and they want to reconquer India. So Kashmir is just a justifiable stepping ground because the Indians aren't angels either. So what they do is they whenever there's a conflict either in Kashmir or the AFPAC region or in Afghanistan, so they usually funnel these terrorists around, and it's a combination of the ISI and these non-state actors like the LAT. And they when there's a fight when it's hot in Kashmir, they send the fighters over to LAT to fight the Indians. But when that cools down, there's international pressure to stop the fighting in Kashmir. They send them over to Afghanistan to fight the Americans. So, alright. Muhammad Yusuf, the Associate Vice President of the United States Institute of Peace and Asian Center, both sides with signaling to each other that the cost of crossing their red lines, which they have clearly defined on the other side, will be high. While neither wants the relationship to actually rupture, the danger of either side miscalculating the red lines of the other is higher than I've never seen before in the last 15 years, he said. The United States has long accused Pakistan of providing safe havens to Afghan Taliban as well as the deadly arm of the Haqqani network, which is true. When there's pressure on Pakistan to shut down the terror in Kashmir, they send these terrorists they give them incentives to go fight in Afghanistan. Hey, you shouldn't be. They arrest the leaders, but they let them go eventually. So they arrest them and they're like, hey, go fight the Americans in Afghanistan or go fight the Indians in Mumbai. That's where they send to Quetta or the Haqqani network. So they always want to fight this. All these Deobandis, they want to fight the West and Indians. Basically anyone they consider non-Muslim. So Pakistan has countered that it has paid a heavy price for the U.S. offensives that its commanders say now cleared all safe havens from Pakistan territory. Pakistan officials says the Taliban controls enough territory in Afghanistan. They do not need Pakistan because the Taliban, the only reason they still exist is because they have safe havens in Pakistan. The Pakistani ISI and other institutions backing it up, and I like to keep it propped up because that's basically their neighbors, and they don't want the Indians to have a foothold in Pakistan. the Indians have already invested $1 billion to help out the Afghans, and the ethnic Afghans, really like the Indians because, unlike Pakistan, which likes to prop up these the Taliban and promote terrorism and instability in the region, and also extremism, India doesn't have any of that investment. And right now, the Indians don't want to get involved in any big way other than financial aid and infrastructure building in Afghanistan. But let me digress. This is an argument that the United States has never accepted, but the U.S. officials would often acknowledge the background meetings that they understand Pakistan's concerns and do not want to bring Afghanistan war to its soil by running the Afghan government enemy on its own. Pakistan also insists that the United States is overestimating the Taliban's presence in Pakistan, which is see, a lot of people don't get is there's two Talibans. There's the regular Taliban, which we've been fighting since 2001, and they've existed prior to that, back to '96, after they assassinated Ahmed Shah Massoud, and they pretty much conquered most of Afghanistan until 2001. And there's the Pakistani Taliban, which is just as religious, but hates the Pakistani establishment and sees them as non-Muslim, like people like Salman Taseer and these liberal Pakistanis, and they want to purge the country of liberals. Alright, but let me digress. We say that there's no longer any organization, safe havens, which is a lie. The Quetta and Bin Laden proved that. So Pakistan Minister of Defense, Kurman Distigar Khan, he added that there may be remnants of militants hiding among the population, but the government is going after them through follow-up operations. 2018 could be rocky. According to Yusuf, the war dragged on and the Taliban have continued their deadly attacks against NATO and Afghan forces. The U.S. has lost my empathy and sympathy for the Pakistan concern, and taking on the Taliban on its side could create a problem for Pakistan. Thomas Lynch, the Distinguished Research Fellow for South Asia and Near East at the National Defense University of Washington, said there's a complete exhaustion factor in the Pakistan and Washington. This is why Pakistan will see an increasing difficulty in the U.S. policy response in coming weeks and months. See, the thing I like about the Donald Trump, the one of the things I like about Donald Trump is because like he could see through everyone's bullshit. Like in previous administrations, Pakistanis, like whenever the new guy came in, new president or new ambassador or whatever, they always wined and dined them, and they know Western, like, not policy, but like sub-communications a lot better. So they came off as Western. They could come off as westernized, as modern, and non-threatening. And they're like, "Oh, India's the bad guy. We're never the aggressors," which is not true at all. And they've always tried to prop themselves up as just defending and like, "Hey, you don't want these bad Taliban guys coming here and taking control of these nukes," and they've just been threatening us with nuclear war, basically. Like, "Hey, you don't want these nukes in the hands of these extremist Taliban, so hey, give us money, give us aid," which a lot of the rich establishment people end up pocketing, like Zardari and them. But let me digress. Pakistan has not been able to use the influence of the Taliban to bring them to the negotiating table. Honestly, they don't have that much control over it. And the Trump administration forces are now taking them off the battlefield. Lynch says that does not mean that talks are off the table. It means the United States would rather talk after the considerably weakened Taliban militancy. Let's agree that Pakistan's role is crucial for negotiating and its battle. But Richard Austin, the former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan, and they end up getting smart to Pakistan's double dealings and bullshit, who has served by the special representative of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Obama administration, is skeptical, obviously, because he's seen through the bullshit. The United States and its leverage to make Pakistan change its behavior, something that the Washington has not been able to do in almost 2 decades, partly because of regional anxieties. Like I said, they like using that nuclear button as like, hey, you don't want the Taliban, these extremists, to get hold of the nukes. Islamabad fears its rival India, which is a good relation with Kabul, will use this opportunity to encircle Pakistan from the west. According to Yusuf and Stephen Hardley, former U.S. ambassador to national security affairs, Pakistan's military has always feared the scenario which Afghanistan offers India a second base from which it could squeeze Pakistan. The two wrote in an op-ed in the New York Times, Pakistan also fears India is trying to disrupt new economic corridor China is helping to develop in Pakistan, the CPEC. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a collection of energy infrastructure projects. The government says it will change the country's flaming economy into a powerhouse. And hopefully it does. Pakistan's Joint Chief Staff's Committee General Zabir Mahmood had told the seminar in Islamabad that the Indian intelligence agency RAW is currently established a new cell with special allocations of over $500 million in 2015 to sabotage CPEC projects in Pakistan. We could take them with a grain of salt because that's also intelligence and counter-intel, and they want you to believe their narrative. Take it with a grain of salt. With the new U.S. South Asia policy encouraging India to play a larger regional role, American intentions in the region also became suspect to Pakistan when Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told the U.S. Senate Armed Service Committee that CPEC passed through disrupted territory, reference to the Kashmir region, disputed territory, Kashmir region, India and Pakistan each claim. Lynch said that thinks the UN sanctions supporting an individual rather than the Pakistani state might prove more forceful than anything else. He probably knows better. I think that you want to sanction the military because they're always pushing for. They always want to like reconquer India. Like, hey, like our ancestors, the Mughals, invaded India from the region where we live right now, like the Pakistan region. That's where the Mughals initiated their conquest of India. I think for certain retired political and military figures will certainly have travel bans and frozen finances. There are different perspectives in Pakistan. I think that we should start from retired and we'd move on from there, he said. Pakistan has an option of closing down NATO supply routes through its territory, but senior Pakistan officials are indicated that they do not do so without careful deliberations. It's a double-edged sword. It's their only leverage. If they close it down, they're gonna get the wrath of the U.S. populace as well as the military and the establishment. Pakistan has been told if they do even attempt to do that in a short period of time, the extensive U.S. sanctions against the significant Pakistan figures would follow quickly. Meanwhile, Pakistan's biggest ally, China, also appears to make an effort to smooth the relationship. I think China would like to see a normal relationship between Pakistan and the United States. Pakistan and the United States have been allies for years, said Lin Zhao, the Chinese deputy chief mission in Islamabad. We have diplomatic consultations with both. The countries have cooperated with each other. Instead of working against each other, we should work against the terrorists together. He added, although he said diplomacy works suddenly, incrementally, and that no one should expect a breakthrough overnight. Which is definitely true. Now, should CPEC happen? Of course. That would do a lot of good for Pakistan and China. What they also should do is they should open up trade with India. If they do that, then it's gonna be way better than how economically well the Western EU countries are doing.